Okay. Camera, action. Okay, what's up, everyone? So I mentioned on Shabbat that there was a tshuva that was written regarding the return of the hostages. The truth, there's a lot of interesting points which come up. Obviously, this is a very, very sensitive issue, and it's a very, very emotional issue. And we continue to pray for the return and the safe return and the healthy return of all of the hostages. But looking at the at some of the halachic issues that come up, so one of the questions that was asked, Rabbi Rimon has asked, what bracha should one say upon hearing about the return of the hostages? B'ezrat Hashem, this is going to be coming up now every week, and so it's a question which repeats itself. Truth is, we spoke here on, I think it was this past Shavuot, we gave a share about the whole concept of brachot, and maybe unusual brachot of specific events, which many of them have fallen into, unfortunately, many of them have fallen into disuse in our generation. All sorts of brachot that the Gemara talks about, the Shulchan Aruch talks about, when significant events happen or a person views certain things. But as halachic people, so there should be Chazal established all sorts of brachot as a way of channeling our emotions and as a way of expressing our thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu over certain events that happen in our lives. And this is certainly a very, very momentous, significant event for all of Am Yisrael. So we should be thinking, how should we respond halachically, and what bracha should we be saying when we hear this news? So there are 4 possible answers, or 5 possible answers as to which bracha should be said when one hears about this. And let's go through and let's see what the proper course of action is. So he says here at the beginning of the tshuva, so we might think that it's a bracha of Shechianu. We might think here that we're dealing with the bracha of Hatov v'Hameitiv. I will explain why. We might think that we're dealing with the bracha of Matir Asurim. We might think we're dealing with the bracha of Mechei Meitim. There are grounds for each one of those. We might think that for whatever reason one doesn't say a bracha. Okay, so those are the 5 options. So let's go through. So let's see. I've seen actually a couple of times, certainly at the beginning, when right at the beginning of the war, if you remember, one of the soldiers, they were able to rescue her. I think it was about 3 weeks in, and they were able to rescue her and bring her back. So on one of the TV channels, in the middle of the news, the anchor put her on a kippah, and he said the bracha, Shechianu or whatever it was. It was very, very, very emotional. The question is, halachically, is that correct? So the first thing here, Rav Rimon begins the tshuva here. He says the first option, what you might think, right? We're talking about people who've been held captive and have been released. So you might think the most appropriate bracha for such a situation is Matir Asurim, right? That's exactly what the words seem to indicate. Matir Asurim, releasing the bat, right? But we know that the bracha of Matir Asurim actually has nothing to do with what it sounds like. Why would we think that the bracha is actually relating to what the words are that it says, right? No, but we say the bracha every morning. One of the brachot you say in Birkot HaShachar is Matir Asurim. And the reason is, right, that is a bracha like Evarim shelanu yotzim kol boker mikil'am, that our limbs are released from their prison, so to speak. We wake up and we can start moving and we're outstretched, etc. And that is where we say the bracha of Matir Asurim, the fact that we can move again. But Matir Asurim actually has nothing to do with people who are imprisoned and who are then released. There is one place, he brings down a footnote, Rabbi Rimon, he says in the Machzor B'nai Roma. Okay, so there is a hashara, I guess there's an estimation that once upon a time, the bracha of Goel Yisrael, which we say in Shemona Esrei, that there was a time when the bracha of Goel Yisrael concluded with Matir Asurim. And the intention was not just for the Geulah of Klal Yisrael, but for those individuals who had been taken captive, etc. But that's a hashara, that's a guess. Nobody knows for sure that it actually said that. There's no source for that, and it's not a bracha that's said by itself. So as much as we may say, again, if you say the words without shame and malchut, so you're not actually saying a bracha. There's no problem with that. If a person wants to say, Baruch Matir Asurim, as a way of giving shvach, that's okay. One can do that, but there's no inyan specifically. But that is not the appropriate bracha, even though it might seem Baruch Matir Asurim with shame and malchut. That is not the bracha we should be saying. Okay. So then he says maybe there's a bracha. We know we have halacha in Shulchan Aruch. We have a Gemara that says the following. Gemara in Shulchan the Gemara says it, and then the Shulchan Aruch says, quoting the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch Siman Reish Kafei says, this is the Siman talking about the bracha of Shechianu. So we have a halacha that Aro'et Chavero Lachar 30 Yom Omer Shechianu. when we haven't seen somebody for 30 days, somebody that we are happy to see again after 30 days, we say the bracha of Shechianu. And the truth is that many of the Achronim write that this bracha does not apply nowadays, that nobody says it. I'll tell you, when it came, not everybody agrees. There are many who do say it. And when it became very popular again, it was after COVID. Again, it was difficult for us to imagine for a long time. You don't see somebody nowadays, you don't see somebody for 30 days. Okay, you talk to them on the phone, you see them on WhatsApp and WhatsApp video, you see them on Zoom, whatever it is. But when we had a situation where, during COVID, everybody was locked in, locked up, locked out, whatever, locked somewhere, and we couldn't actually go out, we couldn't see people. Suddenly there was really a simcha in being able to see people again after 30 days. A lot of tshuvot were written, there was a lot of discussion whether this bracha now applies again. The reason the bracha does not apply nowadays, Rav Shavai says, for example, his explanation is, it's not that anybody you haven't seen for 30 days, you say the bracha. It's the language is, somebody who you haven't seen for 30 days, he says, that you're really pleased to see them. So what's going to happen? A person hasn't been out of his house for 30 days, and he comes into a place, and he sees Reuven and Shimon. He says, Reuven, Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shechianu, V'kimanu, V'gianu, L'zman hazeh. Shimon, right? So how's Shimon going to feel, right? That's how Rav Shavai explains. He says, you're going to start saying this bracha. You're going to say yes to Reuben, to you I say Shechianu, to you I don't say Shechianu. It's going to be very insulting, it's going to be very embarrassing. And therefore he said that that's why we don't find so much that people say it. But as I say, and I think over the past few years, especially since the time of lockdown, etc., people have started saying it, maybe a bit more. So that is the bracha of Shechianu. Shulchan Aruch says, you haven't seen the person for 30 days, you say Shechianu. If you haven't seen them for 12 months, you haven't seen them for a year, so you say the bracha of Mechayeh Meitim. Okay? So the difference is, Shechianu expresses the simcha, expresses the happiness that we have seen a person again. We haven't seen them for a substantial period of time. For 12 months, a year, that's a period where you aren't sure if the person's alive or not. And therefore, once you see them again, you can say Mechayeh Meitim. Actually, the Mishnah Berurah brings a slightly different explanation why you say Mechayeh Meitim if you haven't seen the person for 12 months. He says, "As ein mevarech shechianu." Okay, tam bracha zo katav b'chidushei agadot. Here's the reason. Levi shebakol shana adam nidon b'rosh hashana v'yom ha'kippurim im lamavet im l'chaim. Right, we all know that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, everybody is judged whether you are going to live or you're going to die in the forthcoming year. V'im ra'eh achar Rosh Hashanah v'yom kippurim zeh v'achar kach ein no'eh oto ad achar Rosh Hashanah v'yom kippurim haba. In other words, if I haven't seen a person for a full year, so in part of that time, I've been through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, okay, harei avar lav din im lamut im lav. We've passed through the scenario whereby he's been judged whether he's going to survive or not. And therefore, okay, omer baruch mechayeh meitim shenetzor midin mita b'Rosh Hashanah v'Yom HaKippurim. Now I can say mechayeh meitim when I see you that you've been saved from the judgment of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that is the Mishnah Berurah's explanation. Any event also explained, that you didn't know if the person was alive. You didn't know if they were going to survive for a year, and therefore you can say Mechayeh Meitim. Okay, so that's if I've not had any contact at all with an individual. I'm happy to see. For 30 days, I could say Shechianu. For 12 months, I could say Mechayeh Meitim. What if I've not seen the person in the interim, but I have had contact with them? Okay, so all the Achronim say, if you know you've had contact and you know that the person was alive, so then you don't say Mechayeh Meitim. What about Shechianu? So the Mishnah Berurah writes, it says Lachar 30 yom. It says Im kibel mimeno michtav. Right. So in the 30 days you didn't see him, but you received a letter from him. Or she'anashim hodiu mishlomo, or people told you that sent you greetings from him, etc. It says yesh deot b'achronim. So there are different opinions here in the Achronim. Usveik brachot lakel. Usveik brachot lakel, meaning we would not say. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, you've heard from them in the 30 days. You would not say the bracha. Other Achronim say no. That regarding if you're still. The whole point is if you're really happy to see them. And it could be that it's just a siman, meaning if I've had contact with you, I've had a letter from you, I've had a phone call from you in those 30 days, so the simcha is not so great when I see you again because we've been talking on the phone or we've had correspondence, and therefore, but if the simcha is still there and it's still at that level, then I could say the bracha. So in our situation, where you're talking about people who have been held hostage, there's been absolutely no contact from them. I don't think a propaganda video would count in this case either. So then it would seem, certainly, if we're talking about the family, we're talking about the people who are seeing the hostages, right, seeing them come back and meeting them firsthand. They haven't had contact with them. Certainly, you could say, would seem to be that they could say, the family, when they see them, could say the bracha of Mechei Meitim. Okay, because it's been more than a year, and definitely, they could say Shechianu. Right? Rav Ramon does write here. He says, if you knew for certain that the person was alive, so then not to say Mechei Meitim. I think there's still what to talk about in this scenario because of what the explanation that Mishnah Berurah gave. And the truth is, until they come back, nobody knows for certain. And therefore, I think there's still room to say Mechei Meitim, but everybody would agree that Shechianu, there's no question that can be said. Now, that is for the people who know them and the people that are seeing them in person. The rest of us, we all, Am Yisrael's connected. We all feel like we know all of these people, even though we don't, even though we've never met them before. Can you say Shechianu when not only you've not seen the person for 30 days, but you've never seen the person? This is the first time that you're seeing them. Is there such a concept of saying the bracha of Shechianu? So here, it seems to be, I think it was in the Shulchan Aruch writes, there's one place, there's a source of here where he says that it's only if you see them again, meaning if this is the first time that you've ever seen the person, then you don't say the bracha. Yeah, he says in the next sefer in the Shulchan Aruch, he says, Misha lo ra'at chavro me'olam. You've never seen the person ever. You've met them. You were pen pals, right? You've written letters to each other. You know each other, but you've never actually met. V'shalach lo ktavim, right? Af al pi shu ne'ena bri'ato, eino mevarech al bri'ato. Even though there's a great enjoyment, a great benefit when you see the person, you would not say the bracha for seeing them. However, we have one case where you see a person for the first time, which everybody agrees you do say Shechianu, right? Anybody know what that case is? See a king. So there's a separate bracha which one says when seeing the king, right? That is not that, right? A new baby, right? If a person baby girl is born to you, you would say the bracha of Shechianu, even though you've never seen them before, right? So the Mishnah Berurah explains over there. It says the bat mikol makon nirali pashut. When you see your daughter the first time, mevarech b'kat Shechianu. That's no worse than you see your friend who you haven't seen for 30 days. So again, the Achronim explain over here, all of these are details in terms of what is the criteria for saying the bracha of Shechianu. We say you haven't seen the person for 30 days, that fits the criteria that you're going to be extremely happy to see them. So you see your daughter for the first time, you're extremely happy to see her, therefore you can say the bracha of Shechianu. So again, in our case, it could be as well. They'd say everybody is very, very happy to see whose heart is not, overflowing with joy at seeing the hostages return, and therefore it would seem that if you see them and you're there where they are, right, even though you've never seen them before, you could say the bracha of Shechianu based on this. However, most of this is not going to be relevant for most people, because we don't actually see them when they come back, right? The most that we see is on a TV screen, or we'll see the pictures, or we'll see the videos, okay? If you're watching the videos, which are not, and it's not live, you're not actually seeing the person return, so then that's not really considered seeing them. Rav Ovadia has a tshuva, by the way, in terms of if somebody saw a king on TV, right? Would you say the bracha? He says no. He says it's not considered unless you see the person live in the flesh. Then you would say the bracha. Seeing them on the TV, that is not considered. There's a separate question, by the way. Rabbi Ramon published on Motzei Shabbat a separate tshuva about this, which is if the videos were taken on Shabbat, are we allowed to watch them after Shabbat? Are we allowed to benefit from that? That's a separate question. You may have heard there was a whole thing going on. One of the families, the mother of one of the hostages who hasn't come back yet, said she didn't want people to break Shabbat for the, she said there's enough time after Shabbat to take the pictures. Don't take pictures on Shabbat, we can take them afterwards. And now Bezrat Hashem, my daughter is meant to be released tomorrow, which is not Shabbat. So that's, but in any event, so in terms of saying the bracha of Shechianu, in terms of seeing the hostages released, so let's just summarize. Somebody who is part of the family and is seeing them come back certainly they can say the bracha of Shechianu, maybe even the bracha of Mechei Meitim. Anybody else, somebody who hasn't met them before, and this is an exceptional case, you see them live in the flesh, you could say the bracha of Shechianu as well. If we're just watching on TV or we're watching the recordings afterwards, so from the din of seeing a person after 30 days, we could not say the bracha of Shechianu. However, we know that there is a bracha of Shechianu on a Shmuat Tova. You hear good news, you can say the bracha. So would that apply here, or would there be limitations? Okay, so that is to be continued tomorrow. Rabbi Kenigsberg Mincha אומר, יצא הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל, לפתח בעליהם תורה ומצוות, שנאמר לכם בצומת צדקו, יגדיר תורה וידיר.